My best friend of 15 years systematically destroyed my life by stealing my wedding venue, seducing my fiancé, and copying my business to compete against me. I spent 8 months planning the perfect revenge that exposed her lies, ruined her dream wedding, destroyed her fake business, and left her with nothing while I rebuilt my life better than ever. I'm Emma, 29 years old, and up until 18 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life planned out. I was engaged to David, a guy I'd been with for 4 years, who seemed like everything I wanted in a partner. My best friend since middle school, Melissa, was going to be my maid of honor. I had just started my own event planning business specializing in weddings, and it was taking off faster than I'd ever imagined. I had bookings for the next year, glowing reviews, and enough money saved up to put a down payment on the house David and I wanted to buy after our wedding. Melissa and I had been inseparable since we were 14. We went to different colleges, but stayed in touch constantly, spent every holiday together, shared everything with each other. She was the sister I never had, and I trusted her with my life. When I got engaged, she cried harder than I did. When I started my business, she was my biggest cheerleader, sharing my posts on social media and recommending me to everyone she knew. Looking back, I realized she was studying my every move, but at the time, I thought she was just being supportive. The first sign something was wrong came about 10 months before my wedding. I had booked the most incredible venue for my ceremony and reception, a historic mansion with gardens that had been featured in several magazines. It was expensive, but David and I had saved for 2 years to afford it, and it was absolutely perfect. The booking was solid, contract signed, deposit paid months in advance. Then, 6 weeks before my wedding, I got a phone call that changed everything. The venue coordinator called to tell me there had been a mix-up with the bookings, and another bride had claimed my date with documentation showing she had booked it first. They were terribly sorry, but they would have to honor the other booking since it appeared to have been made earlier than mine. They offered me a different date 6 months later, or a full refund, but explained that the other bride had threatened legal action and had documentation they couldn't dispute. I was devastated. This venue wasn't just any location. It was the place where David had proposed to me during a tour we'd taken the previous year. It held sentimental value that couldn't be replaced. I demanded to see the documentation that proved the other bride had booked first, and after hours of arguing, they finally admitted the other bride was Melissa Hartwell. My best friend had somehow booked my venue for the exact same date as my wedding. When I called Melissa, she sounded genuinely shocked and upset. She explained that she had recently gotten engaged to someone she'd been dating secretly for months, and when they went to book venues, this one was the only one available on their preferred date. She claimed she had no idea it was the same venue as mine and that the booking system must have made an error. She offered to give up the venue, but explained that she'd already sent save the dates to 200 guests, and her fiancé's family had already booked flights from overseas. Something felt wrong about her story, but I wanted to believe my best friend wouldn't intentionally sabotage my wedding. I agreed to let her keep the venue and scramble to find something else for my day. It was incredibly stressful and expensive to change everything at the last minute, but I managed to find another beautiful location and thought the crisis was over. That's when I discovered who Melissa's mysterious fiancé was. 2 weeks after the venue incident, David came home acting strange. He was distant, checking his phone constantly, and seemed nervous around me. When I asked what was wrong, he sat me down and confessed that he'd been having doubts about our relationship. He said he loved me, but wasn't sure he was ready for marriage, and he thought we should postpone the wedding to work on some issues. I was confused because we hadn't been having any problems. Our relationship seemed solid, and he'd been excited about the wedding just weeks before. When I pressed him for specifics about what issues we needed to work on, he became vague and defensive. He said he needed some space to think, and maybe we should take a break from living together. I was heartbroken, but agreed to give him the space he said he needed. 3 days later, I saw David's car parked outside Melissa's apartment. I sat there for 2 hours watching her building, and when they came out together, I saw them kiss. Not a friendly kiss, but the kind of passionate kiss you share with someone you're in love with. My best friend and my fiancé were having an affair, and suddenly everything made sense. The venue wasn't a coincidence. Melissa had deliberately booked my venue because she was planning to marry my fiancé. I followed them at a distance and watched them go to the same restaurant where David had taken me for our first anniversary. They were holding hands across the table, looking at each other the way David used to look at me. I took photos of everything, documenting their affair while my heart broke into pieces. When I got home that night, I found David's spare key on the kitchen counter with a note saying he was staying at a friend's place and would come get his things when I wasn't home. The next morning, I called Melissa to confront her. I told her I knew about her and David, and I demanded an explanation. She broke down crying and confessed everything. She said she'd been in love with David since the day I introduced them 4 years ago, but had never acted on it because she didn't want to hurt me. But over the past year, as she helped me plan my wedding, she realized she couldn't stand the thought of watching me marry the man she loved. She admitted to deliberately pursuing David, texting him constantly under the guise of helping plan surprise elements for our wedding, inviting him to coffee to discuss bachelor party ideas, and slowly building an emotional connection that eventually turned physical. She said David had confessed his own feelings for her, and they realized they were meant to be together. She had booked our venue because David had told her how special it was to us, and she wanted to have her perfect day in the place where he'd proposed to the wrong woman. I was so shocked by her confession that I barely knew how to respond. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. It was a calculated, systematic campaign to steal my life. She had spent months manipulating both David and me, playing the role of supportive best friend while actively working to destroy my relationship. When I asked how she could do this to me after 15 years of friendship, she said she was sorry I was hurt, but she couldn't help who she loved. That's when she delivered the final blow. She told me that she and David were planning to get married at my venue on what was supposed to be my wedding date, and she hoped I would understand that she had to follow her heart. She actually asked if I would help her plan the wedding since I was so good at event planning, and she wanted everything to be perfect for her special day. I hung up on her and spent the next week in a haze of grief, rage, and disbelief. I had lost my fiancé, my best friend, my dream venue, and my faith in people all at once. But after that week of wallowing, something changed in me. I got angry, really angry, and I decided that if Melissa wanted to play games, I would show her what a real game looked like. I started by doing research on Melissa's new life. I discovered that her mysterious fiancé story was completely fabricated. She wasn't secretly dating someone for months. She had been systematically seducing my fiancé while pretending to be my best friend. I also learned that she had quit her job as a marketing coordinator and started her own event planning business just 2 months after I started mine. This wasn't a coincidence either. I found her website and social media accounts, and she had copied almost everything from my business. My pricing structure, my service packages, my marketing language, even some of my actual client photos that she had posted as examples of her work. She was using her connection to me to steal my clients, telling people she had learned from the best and could provide the same quality service for less money. I realized that Melissa hadn't just stolen my fiancé and my venue. She had been systematically copying my entire life and business for months while pretending to be my friend. Every detail I had shared with her about client preferences, vendor relationships, and business strategies had been fed directly to her. Competing business. She had been playing a long game, and I was just the latest casualty in her plan to build her perfect life by stealing mine. That's when I decided to destroy her, methodically and completely. I spent the next 2 months planning my revenge while pretending to be devastated and defeated. I let Melissa think she had won, that I was too broken to fight back. I even sent her a text saying I forgave her and David, and that I hoped they would be happy together. She responded with a long message about how much our friendship meant to her, and how she hoped we could rebuild our relationship after some time had passed. Meanwhile, I was building a case against her that would destroy everything she had stolen from me. I started by documenting her business theft. I had time-stamped files of all my original work, dated photographs of my client events, and email records showing when I had shared ideas with her. I hired a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property theft to review everything, and he confirmed that I had a strong case for damages. I also started investigating her fake business more deeply. I created fake client profiles and contacted her for quotes, recorded phone calls where she pitched my exact service packages using my original language, and documented instances where she was claiming credit for events I had actually planned. She was even using reviews from my satisfied clients on her website, just changing the names to make it look like they were her clients. But the business theft was just the beginning. I also started investigating her relationship with David and uncovered evidence that she had been manipulating him for much longer than either of them had admitted. I found text messages between them going back 8 months, long before she claimed their relationship had started. She had been working on him systematically, undermining his confidence in our relationship while positioning herself as his perfect match. The messages revealed her true strategy. She had been telling David that I was too focused on my business to be a good wife, that I was selfish for spending so much money on our wedding, and that she could see he wasn't really happy with me. She sent him articles about starter marriages and divorce statistics, subtly planting seeds of doubt about our future together. At the same time, she was presenting herself as everything I wasn't. Spontaneous where I was planned, easygoing where I was particular, always available where I was busy with work. Armed with all this evidence, I began phase 1 of my revenge plan. I waited until exactly 6 weeks before Melissa's wedding to David, the same timeline they had given me when they stole my venue. I filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Melissa's business for intellectual property theft, unfair competition, and fraud. The lawsuit included demands for monetary damages, immediate cessation of her business activities, and public acknowledgement of her theft. The timing was perfect because she had already collected deposits from multiple clients for upcoming weddings, including a very expensive event for a prominent local family that was scheduled 2 weeks after her own wedding. The lawsuit froze her business assets and required her to immediately stop using any of my copyrighted materials, which was essentially everything on her website and in her client presentations. Within 24 hours of the lawsuit being filed, Melissa called me screaming and crying. She accused me of trying to destroy her life out of jealousy and spite. She said she couldn't believe I would be so vindictive over a man who had chosen someone else. I calmly told her that the lawsuit had nothing to do with David and everything to do with her stealing my intellectual property to build her competing business. If she had started her own original business, I wouldn't have cared, but she had built her success on my work, and that was theft. She begged me to drop the lawsuit, promising to shut down her business and pay me back for any damages. But it was too late for negotiations. I had spent months planning this revenge, and her business theft was just the first phase. I told her that she should have thought about consequences before she decided to steal my life and hung up on her. The lawsuit created immediate problems for Melissa's upcoming wedding. The legal fees were enormous, and with her business assets frozen, she had no income to pay for her wedding expenses. She had been counting on the profits from her stolen business to pay for the elaborate celebration she had planned at my venue. Without that money, she couldn't afford the flowers, the catering, the photographer, or any of the other vendors she had booked. But I wasn't done with the financial pressure. Phase 2 of my plan involved systematically destroying her reputation in our social circle and professional network. I had spent weeks documenting every lie she had told, every client she had deceived, and every instance of her unethical behavior. I created a comprehensive presentation that laid out the complete timeline of her deception, with receipts for everything. I started by reaching out to mutual friends and family members who had been invited to her wedding. I didn't gossip or spread rumors. Instead, I simply shared the facts about what had happened. I showed them the evidence of her business theft, the timeline of her affair with David, and the documentation of her systematic deception. I let the evidence speak for itself and allowed people to draw their own conclusions. The response was immediate and devastating for Melissa. People who had known us both for years were horrified by the evidence of her calculated betrayal. Many of them had recommended her services to their friends based on their trust in our friendship, not knowing she was using stolen work. Others had lent her money or provided emotional support during her difficult time, not realizing she had orchestrated the entire situation. Her family was particularly upset when they learned the truth about her engagement. They had welcomed David as a future son-in-law and were planning to spend thousands of dollars to attend the wedding, not knowing he was stolen goods. Her mother called me personally to apologize and to tell me that she had always considered me a daughter. She said she was ashamed of Melissa's behavior and wouldn't be attending the wedding. Within 2 weeks of me sharing the evidence, more than half of the guests invited to Melissa's wedding had canceled their attendance. Her bridal shower was canceled when all but 2 of her bridesmaids dropped out. Her bachelorette party was called off because no one wanted to celebrate a marriage built on betrayal and theft. The wedding she had stolen from me was turning into a public humiliation, but the social consequences were nothing compared to the professional destruction that was unfolding. Word spread quickly through our local wedding industry about Melissa's business practices. Vendors who had worked with her discovered that the beautiful portfolio she had shown them was mostly my work. Clients realized they had been deceived about her experience and qualifications. Other event planners in the area banded together to warn potential clients about her fraudulent practices. The prominent family whose wedding she was supposed to plan immediately fired her and demanded a refund of their deposit. They hired me instead, ironically giving me one of the biggest contracts of my career. Other clients followed suit, canceling their contracts with Melissa and requesting refunds she couldn't afford to pay. Her business didn't just fail, it imploded spectacularly and publicly. Phase 3 of my revenge involved David himself. While Melissa was dealing with the lawsuit and the social fallout, I was working on a separate plan to make David pay for his betrayal. I had kept all of his belongings when he moved out, including some items that were quite valuable. I also had access to shared accounts and knew details about his financial situation that he probably forgot I knew. David had a gambling problem that he had hidden from me for most of our relationship. I had discovered it about a year before. Our breakup when I found suspicious charges on our shared credit card, but he had convinced me he was getting help and had it under control. What he didn't know was that I had continued monitoring his activity and knew he was still gambling regularly, including using money from our joint savings account that was supposed to be for our house down payment. I gathered evidence of his gambling activities and his use of our shared funds for unauthorized purposes. Then I filed a civil lawsuit against him for theft and fraud, demanding return of the money he had stolen from our joint accounts, plus damages for emotional distress. I also reported his activities to his employer, a financial services company that had strict policies about employees with gambling problems. The timing of David's lawsuit coincided perfectly with the stress Melissa was already under from her own legal and social problems. David lost his job pending an investigation into his conduct, which meant he could no longer contribute to paying for their wedding. The financial pressure on both of them became overwhelming, and they started fighting constantly about money, blame, and their uncertain future. I watched their relationship crumble from a distance, and it was clear that their love story was built on lies and mutual self-interest rather than genuine connection. David had been attracted to Melissa because she seemed easier and more fun than me, while Melissa had wanted David because he represented stability and the life she thought I didn't deserve. When the pressure mounted and their individual facades cracked, they realized they barely knew each other. 4 weeks before their wedding, David moved out of Melissa's apartment and back in with his parents. He claimed he needed space to deal with his legal problems, but it was obvious to everyone that their relationship was falling apart. Melissa was left alone, facing a lawsuit, professional ruin, social ostracism, and now abandonment by the man she had destroyed our friendship to steal. She called me one last time, 2 weeks before her wedding date, begging me to help her. She said she had made terrible mistakes, but she was losing everything and didn't know what to do. She offered to publicly apologize, to pay me whatever damages I wanted, and to cancel her wedding if I would just stop destroying her life. She cried and said she realized now that she had been selfish and wrong, and she just wanted to make things right. I listened to her entire plea without saying a word. When she finished, I told her that she had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I said that I might have forgiven a moment of weakness or a single mistake, but she had spent months systematically destroying my life while pretending to be my friend. She had stolen my business, my fiancé, my venue, and my trust, and then she had asked me to help her celebrate her theft. I told her that some actions can't be undone, and some betrayals can't be forgiven. Yo hung up on her for the final time and blocked her number. 2 weeks later, on what was supposed to be both of our wedding days, I was on a solo vacation in Europe while Melissa sat alone in her apartment. The venue she had stolen from me sat empty because she couldn't afford to pay the final balance. The vendors she had booked canceled their services due to non-payment. The few guests who hadn't already canceled stayed home because there was no longer a wedding to attend. The aftermath of my revenge was more complete than I had ever imagined possible. Melissa's business was permanently destroyed. Her reputation in our community was ruined. Her relationship with David ended in mutual recrimination, and she was facing significant financial liability from both my lawsuit and the refunds she owed to canceled clients. She eventually had to move back in with her parents and take a job in retail to pay her legal bills. David's consequences were equally severe. He lost his job, his professional reputation, and his financial stability. The gambling problem he and Teen had hidden for so long became public knowledge, making it difficult for him to find new employment in his field. He also faced legal consequences for the theft from our joint accounts and had to enter a court-mandated gambling addiction program. But the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't their punishment. It was my own recovery and success. While they were dealing with the consequences of their actions, I was rebuilding my life better than it had ever been. The publicity from exposing Melissa's business fraud actually brought me new clients who appreciated my integrity and thoroughness. My business grew rapidly, and I was able to expand into corporate events and luxury weddings. I also started dating again and met someone wonderful who respected my intelligence, supported my ambition, and valued honesty above all else. James was everything David wasn't: faithful, genuine, communicative, and secure enough in himself to celebrate my successes rather than feeling threatened by them. We took our time getting to know each other, and when he proposed a year later, it was at a beautiful location we had discovered together, not a place tainted by old memories. The legal cases against both Melissa and David were eventually settled, out of court. Melissa agreed to pay me substantial damages for the business theft and to sign a comprehensive non-compete agreement that prevented her from working in event planning in our state for 5 years. David repaid the money he had stolen from our joint accounts plus interest and penalties and agreed to seek professional help for his gambling addiction. More importantly, I learned valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and recognizing red flags in relationships. I realized that Melissa had shown signs of competitive and envious behavior throughout our friendship, but I had ignored them because I wanted to believe the best about someone I cared about. Her constant comparisons, her tendency to copy my choices, and her subtle undermining of my confidence were all warning signs I should have recognized sooner. I also learned that David's gambling problem was connected to other issues with honesty and impulse control that I had overlooked during our relationship. His ability to lie to my face about his activities while secretly stealing from our shared accounts was a red flag for his capacity to betray me in other ways. People who can deceive you about one important thing will usually deceive you about others. The experience taught me that some people view relationships as competitions rather than partnerships, and they will sacrifice anyone to get what they want. Melissa didn't just want David, she wanted to prove that she could take him from me. She didn't just want a successful business, she wanted to build it by destroying mine. Her actions were driven by envy and a sense of entitlement that made her believe she deserved whatever I had worked for. Looking back now, almost 2 years later, I feel grateful for what happened, even though it was incredibly painful at the time. Discovering Melissa's true character and David's dishonesty before I married him saved me from a much more devastating betrayal later in life. If they had waited until after our wedding to reveal their affair, I would have faced divorce, financial complications, and even deeper emotional trauma. Instead, their impatience and arrogance gave me the opportunity to expose them before I was legally or financially tied to David, and before Melissa could do even more damage to my business. Their betrayal was terrible, but their stupidity in handling it gave me all the ammunition I needed to ensure they faced appropriate consequences. I occasionally hear updates about both of them through mutual acquaintances. Melissa eventually moved to another state and took a corporate marketing job, but she struggles with her reputation following her online. David completed his gambling addiction program and found work at a smaller firm, but his career prospects remain limited due to his professional misconduct. Neither of them has married or found lasting relationships, which suggests they may have learned something about the consequences of building relationships on lies and betrayal. As for me, James and I had our wedding at a venue even more beautiful. than the one Melissa stole, surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us. My business continues to thrive, and I've become known in our industry not just for creating beautiful events, but for my integrity and professionalism. I've also become an advocate for other small business owners who face unfair competition from people who steal their work and ideas. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that the best revenge isn't just destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so successful and fulfilling that their absence becomes a blessing rather than a loss. Melissa thought she was stealing my perfect life, but she actually freed me to create something even better. David thought he was trading, up for someone more exciting, but he lost someone who truly loved him for someone who was just using him to get what she wanted. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about how thoroughly I destroyed their lives, or if I think my response was too extreme. My answer is always the same. They made their choices with full knowledge of the potential consequences, and they chose to hurt me in the most calculated and devastating way possible. They didn't just make a mistake or have a moment of weakness. They spent months planning and executing a campaign to steal my entire life while pretending to care about me. The consequences they faced were proportional to the damage they tried to inflict, and more importantly, my actions prevented them from hurting other people in the same way. Melissa can no longer build a business by stealing other people's work because her reputation for fraud follows her everywhere. David learned that his dishonesty and gambling problem have serious consequences that extend beyond his personal life, into his professional reputation. I also think about all the people who were saved from being victimized by them in the future. The clients who won't hire Melissa based on fake credentials, the women who won't date David without knowing about his gambling problem and propensity for deception, the business partners who won't trust them based on their documented history of unethical behavior. In that sense, my revenge served a broader purpose of protecting innocent people from predatory behavior. The story became somewhat famous in our local community and even gained attention online when I shared it on social media as a cautionary tale about business ethics and friendship betrayal. It's been shared thousands of times and has generated hundreds of comments from people who have experienced similar betrayals. Many people have told me that reading about my systematic approach to seeking justice gave them the courage to stand up for themselves in their own situations. I've been invited to speak at business conferences about protecting intellectual property and dealing with unfair competition, and at relationship seminars about recognizing and responding to betrayal in personal relationships. It's been gratifying to turn my painful experience into something that helps other people avoid or address similar situations in their own lives. The ultimate irony is that Melissa's attempt to steal my life actually led to me having a much better life than I ever could have imagined. If she hadn't forced me to see David's true character, I might have married him and spent years dealing with his gambling addiction and dishonesty. If she hadn't stolen my business ideas, I might not have developed the comprehensive documentation and legal strategies that now protect my intellectual property better than ever. Her betrayal taught me to be more careful about who I trust, more protective of my business interests, and more confident in my ability to fight back when someone tries to take advantage of me. These lessons have made me stronger, more successful, and better equipped to build healthy relationships with people who genuinely care about my well-being. Today, I have everything Melissa thought she was stealing from me. A loving partner who chose me for who I really am, a successful business built on my own hard work and integrity, and a beautiful life surrounded by people who truly care about me. The difference is that everything I have now is authentic, earned, and built to last, while everything she tried to steal was based on lies and manipulation that were doomed to fail. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while your enemies destroy themselves, but sometimes people need to face real consequences for their actions to prevent them from hurting others. In Melissa and David's case, they needed to learn that betrayal and theft have serious and lasting consequences that extend far beyond the immediate satisfaction of getting what they want. I hope that sharing this story helps other people who are dealing with similar betrayals. The most important thing I want people to understand is that you don't have to accept being victimized by people who claim to care about you. You have the right to defend yourself, seek justice, and ensure that people who hurt you face appropriate consequences for their actions. Document everything, build your case carefully, and don't let anyone convince you that seeking justice makes you the bad person. People who betray your trust while pretending to love you are counting on your kindness and forgiveness to escape consequences for their actions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for their future victims is to make sure they learn that their behavior is unacceptable and won't be tolerated. The best part of this whole experience is that it's truly over now. Melissa and David are part of my past. Their consequences are permanent parts of their futures. And I'm focused on building an even better life with people who deserve my trust and love. Justice was served, lessons were learned, and I came out stronger and happier than I ever thought possible.